You could pick 4 or more days and not notice much change. However, if 3 days was preferred for some reason, then it wouldn't be the days they claim, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. Since the solstice is on the 22nd at 6 a.m., then it would be the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd as the most southern 3 days. This is a good opportunity to try to explain what's going on here, because if you understand the concept I'm about to say, then a lot of this is going to all of a sudden make sense to you. First, you have to understand that sun worship has been around for a long time. But usually, it's not exactly them worshiping the sun, but something that the sun represents. Now, you have to understand that those people took over Christianity 400 years after trying to completely destroy it. Rome, all of a sudden, had a change of heart, and then became Christianity, or rather, this monster that said that they were Christianity. And they chose a date for the birthday of Jesus. And the date that they chose was chosen because of its connection to the sun. They did other things too. This is also when you start to find depictions of Jesus with halos and other obvious references to the zodiac and sun worship. You have to understand that this stuff doesn't prove that Jesus was a sun god. It only proves that sun worshippers were paying artists to depict Jesus more to their liking. There's a lot more to talk about this astrotheology, but we'll save that for other parts. But I do want to say this. There's not a clear definition. I know that Acharya S. on a recent movie has alluded to the fact that the reason that there's no Wikipedia entry for astrotheology is because of censorship, because it's somehow the theology no one wants you to know about. Well, I'll suggest that the reason that there's no Wikipedia entry is because there's no information on it. I would think that the Wikipedia entry would go something like this. Astrotheology is a term that Jordan Maxwell came up with out of absolutely nowhere, and Michael Tsarian started selling books and DVDs and $75 I Love Astrotheology t-shirts. I'll leave you with this. The main cheerleaders for astrotheology always tell us to do our homework. Yet, they're telling us lies that could only work if we're completely ignorant to the facts. So I just wanted to point out that this can all be stopped by us becoming more informed. Stop being walked all over by the mystery schools and told what to think and told who to hate. It's not up to them to tell you who to hate. They're using 2-bit, half-assed lies to do so. Stand up and say you're not going to take this anymore.
In the age section of the film, they claim that it is the astrological age that is referenced throughout the New Testament. They also mention Taurus as the age of the bull. They cite the Old Testament story about the ancient Israelites making a golden calf in Exodus 32 to support this assertion, that the Israelites were somehow associated with the age of Taurus. He says, quote, "The golden bull was really Taurus the bull, and Moses represents the new age of Aries, the ram. Jesus ushered in the age of Pisces, or the age of 2 fish, unquote. Then Aquarius with Luke 22 verse 10. They spend 5 long minutes on this, going through the Bible verses and giving their theory and inducting people into the New Age movement, explaining how supposedly Aquarius is in the Bible as being an age and the Jesus fish supposedly representing Pisces. Zeitgeist is fast to explain that, quote, "and ancient societies were very aware of this," unquote. They make sure to say that because their whole theory and that whole 5 minutes hinges on the idea that the ancients acknowledged the astronomical concept they refer to. If it turns out that this age concept is a modern concept, their whole theory falls apart, and that whole 5 minutes was a big waste of time. As Dr. Noel Swerdlow, the professor of astronomy and astrophysics at the University of Chicago, and who received the MacArthur Foundation Fellowship, often referred to as the Genius Grant, remarks, quote, "The modern ideas about the age of Pisces or the age of Aquarius are based upon the location of the vernal equinox in the regions of the stars of those constellations, but the regions, the borders between. Those constellations are a completely modern convention of the International Astronomical Union for the purpose of mapping and never had any astrological significance. I hope this is helpful, although in truth what this woman is claiming is so wacky that it is hardly worth answering. So when this woman says that the Christian fish was a symbol of the coming age of Pisces, she is saying something that no one would have thought of in antiquity. To name another anachronism that appears to underline her interpretation, The borders of constellations between, say, Aries, Pisces, and Aquarius are modern conventions of the International Astronomical Union, and there is nothing ancient about them. Ancient astrologers did not use Norton's star atlas or anything else that drew arbitrary lines between sidereal constellations. The location of the equinox among one or another zodiacal constellation, as the so-called age of Aquarius or age of Pisces, is something of concern to modern astrology, but is never mentioned as significant in ancient astrology. It is simply anachronistic to believe that what is important to 20th century astrology was of importance to ancient astrology, unquote. This means Zeitgeist's argumentation regarding the various astrological ages is irrelevant. In other words, the ancient Christ conspirators could not have recognized the 12 celestial sections in order to incorporate them into a Christian myth and announce the ushering in of the age of Pisces, because the division into the celestial sections did not occur until a meeting of the International Astronomical Union in the 20th century. In regard to the Jesus fish, former professional astrologer for 8 years, Marcia Montenegro states, quote, "The fish was an early symbol of Christ because the Greek word based on the initials of Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior, spelled fish." And last, Zeitgeist claims that Jesus' birth date is at the start of this age. However, again, the New Testament writers do not indicate the date of Jesus' birth. They next mention the supposed plagiarized story of Moses. They say, quote, "This baby in a basket story was lifted directly from the myth of Sargon of Akkad of around 2250 BC, unquote. Well, there are similarities, but dating is the major factor. Is it true that the Sargon story was dated from 2250 BC? Again, dating is the serious issue. The Moses story dates to 1400 BC. A few critics would say it's earlier. But on the other hand, the Sargon story lacks any obvious grammatical, lexicographical, or philological features that would allow precise dating. The initial date range is anywhere between 2039 to 627 BC, not 2250 BC as Zeitgeist claims. In favor of a late date, for example, are Neo-Assyrian orthographic forms. So in other words, the story of Sargon has a huge chance of being dated after 1400 BC, after the Moses story. Brian Lewis, author of the Sargon Legend 1978, offers a suggestion that the story was written in the reign of Sargon II, a much later king, to legitimate his own rule. There are many similarities to the reign of Sargon II, which is dated later than Moses at around 721 to 705 BC. In any case, many conclude that there is no satisfactory reason to propose borrowing or fictionalization in either direction. The adoption of foundlings was a known and common practice in antiquity. Zeitgeist is being very disingenuous when they speak objectively concerning this. There is no precise date set to the Sargon story, and many even believe it's after Moses. Zeitgeist then goes to the numerous supposed lawgivers which they say Moses was based off of. They claim Manu, Minos, and Meses were lawgivers similar to Moses. These claims can be found on page 169 of Acharya S.'s The Christ Conspiracy, yet Acharya S. does not cite any primary sources, as usual. Her source is Deceptions and Myths of the Bible, 1991 by Lloyd Graham. But even the skeptic scholar Michael Lido concedes that this is not a credible source. Lido states, quote, "Graham's Deceptions and Myths of the Bible, I will concede, is a terrible source. Once I discovered how bad the source was, I had to edit the book prior to publishing," unquote. Regarding Meses, he states, quote, "I will not argue the Meses story," unquote. Since there are no primary texts offered to support this thesis, they have not made a case worth serious consideration. Manu is 1000 BC anyway. That's after Moses. Then they go on to the Ten Commandments and say they are taken outright from spell 125 of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Then they list the similarities. Moses and the Ten Commandments dates approximately 1400 BC to not before 850 BC. Now, as far as spell 125, there are numerous authors and redactors over time. First written account is somewhere between 1550 to 950 BC. It is tenable that the Ten Commandments predate spell 125 or rival spell 125 in chronological history. The book has been altered hundreds if not thousands of times by various Egyptian clerics and royalty. This further exacerbates an effort to date the spell. However, Perhaps it is more important to understand the differences between the two writings. The Ten Commandments represent a concise, positive imperative from God to man, and the life he should lead.